theyeshiva.net.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome. The last line on page Vav. So the system down here, the system in our world is that when somebody is tried, say somebody is given a sentence, a prison sentence, naturally, the longer the time that they serve, the easier the conditions become. And there's a logic to it. Because the further it is from the original sin, the original crime, so the less intense the penalty and the punishment, and the closer to emancipation, to freedom, and so forth. According to this, the system of Galus, exile, when we understand it in terms of mipnei chateinu galinu me'artzenu, it's a consequence or a penalty or a cleansing for sin. So the longer it becomes, the easier it should become. Until Maamar at the end, it's very easy. Like they'll take a prisoner, they'll put him in a halfway house, which is already, he's quasi-free. That's what he says. Al kol panim, the last line on Vav. Aval al kol panim hayitzarech liyas, seder hagalus, the system of Galus should have been mitchila b'toikef yoser. In the beginning, I understand it's more intense, it's more powerful. U'mischalish la'at la'at, and the effects of the exile become weaker slowly, less strong and less strong. Ad shebisayir ha'geula, until geula is aroused, geula comes. And we see this in everything. As he says before, a person sometimes is very upset about something. But time heals things. In the beginning of an event, you can't compare it to the way it's 10 years later. In the beginning, sometimes you're very stressed, you're anxious, you're upset, you're angry. With time, if you could deal with it, we're not talking if you're oppressed, then sometimes it's worse. But if you deal with it, you talk about it, it gets weaker and weaker. Yeah. This here we come to Moshe's second question. In addition to the first that we explored, what's the very concept of Galus? Lama hariyosed is the second question, and that is me'az basi al pari l'daber b'shmecha. Heira lamaze v'hatza lo yitzalta samecha. This is a second question. That v'lama haya behepechza. Here you have the exact opposite trend. Mitchila kasov. In the beginning of the Galus, it says, Vayichi Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim shva'as Rishana. The beginning of the Egyptian exile begins with Yaakov relocating with his family, leaving the land of Canaan, his native land where he lived, his father lived, his grandfather lived, and entering into exile. The Pasuk says he lived in Mitzrayim 17 years. Va'amru razal. The commentators, our sages teach, Lahayu yamim tovim, shayasharu b'tova yosema. It was the best years of Yaakov's life. The Balaturim famously says, Shva'as Rishon is the gematria of Tov. Tes Vavez is 9, 6 and 2 is 17. Yaakov lived 17 years in Mitzrayim. It wasn't just 17 in terms of numbers, it was also Tov. 17 in terms of it was the best years. The whole family was reunited. There was at last peace and quiet. He wasn't running away from Eisa. He wasn't running away from Lavan. He wasn't weeping and mourning for his son Yosef. The family was reunited. It was a very special time. Yaakov did not want to go down. Hashem promised him, Al tira mirdei Mitzrayim. He told him, don't fear, because there was a tremendous fear. Because it was exile, it was leaving Eretz Canaan, it was leaving the land of the Avos, it was leaving the land that he knew Hashem promised to the Jewish people, which is why he made Yosef swear to bring him back for burial to Eretz Yisrael. There was a struggle, there was a strife, because it was Galus, but nonetheless, it was considered Yaakov's best years. Vayichi Yaakov segeven gelept. It says he was alive, he was fully alive. V'achar later, as generations continue, Yaakov passes away, it's still good. It's not the same quality, but it's still good. And then ultimately the brothers pass away. Ultimately Yosef passes away. And then the Acher Kach, and then the Galus starts, and then this Atzema Galus. And then the Galus gets even stronger, more powerful. Ad, Shemishanol de Miriam, Tamu Tam Mar Bepoyel Mamish Bepei Vav Shana Macharenos. Chazal say the worst was from when Miriam was born. Miriam was 6 years older than Moshe. Moshe was 80 years old when the Jews left Egypt. The Torah says when he came to Pari, he was 80. And a year later they left, or a few months later they left Egypt. Miriam was 6 years older than Moshe. So she was 86 at the time that Moshe was 80 and he confronted Pari. So it says, from when Miriam, one of the reasons she was named Miriam is Miriam comes from the word mar, right? Like marar, bitter. Marim, we have marim in Parshas B'Shalach, the water is bitter. They were bitter. Marim is the same letters like Miriam. So they named Miriam because of the mirirus, the bitterness of the time, because of the Galus became much more intense. The Jews were there for 210 years. But most of the time, the situation wasn't so horrific, even though it was always an exile. In the beginning, it was mamish delightful. It was, Yaakov had a great time, they had a great time. But as time progressed, it became worse. The last 86 years, it was a tam mar, there was a bitter taste of Poel Mamish, to the point that we all know that when Miriam was a little girl, only a few years after her birth, she had to convince her father to come back to her mother, because the Gemara says in Maseches Soita that Amram separated from his wife Yocheved because there was a decree that all of the Jewish children, the male children, should be cast into the Nile Delta. So why should he have a baby only to be killed, Rahman al-Litzlan? So he separated, and since Amram was the Gadol Hadar, everybody emulated him and everybody separated, and it was little Miriam, who was a baby, she was 5 or 6 years old, who chastised her father and said, you're worse than Pari. Pari is killing all the males, and you're going to kill also all the females. Pari's edict will end one day. Your edict won't end. Pari is killing them in Olam Hazeh, you're killing them for Olam Haba too. You're stopping the whole existence of the Jewish people. So she caused her father, a daring little girl, she caused her father to come back, and Moshe was born as a result. So we see that from the beginning of Miriam's birth, that's when the Galus took on a much bitter, a worse shape. And it's interesting, it's the 86 last years, Shul Gematria Elikim. Elikim, Aleph, Lamed, Hey, Yud, Mem, don't mix up with the Kuf. Somebody once asked me, Elikim is not 86 because they were spelling it with a Kuf. But Elikim is not spelled with a Kuf. Elikim is Aleph, Lamed, Hey. Yud Mem is 86, Pei Vav. Elikim is Midas Hadin, Midas Hatzimtzum. Like we learned before, Vayidaber Elikim El Moshe. Those were the last 86 years, the Shem Elikim. Okay, finally, after all this, there's a Hisayrus, the Geula is coming to fruition. Rebbeinu Shalom summons Moshe by the burning bush and says, you will be the man, you will Shamati, I heard the cry of the Jewish people, you will summon, you will create the redemption. At least now, well, what happens now? Hichbid HaGalus. Now it becomes even worse. If it wasn't bad enough till now, it becomes even worse. Begashris uberuchnes. Both on a material level, the slave labor increased, the torture increased, which is why the policemen, the Jewish policemen told Moshe and Aaron, God should judge you, because you have now given a sword to Pari to kill us. What about earlier? Earlier they still had, Jews sometimes, even in the worst conditions, have hopes. Pari is not so bad, we can make this work. But you're the one who's ruining it, because you're talking about Geula. They told him, you gave a sword in the hand of Pari now to kill us. What did he do till now? What did he do till now? He saved you. But in their mind, somehow there was, relatively speaking, there was a comfort zone within the suffering of Egypt. And now it's all going to get ruined. The last excuse me, the last straw that we were leaning on, pun intended, is now also ruined because we have to get our own straw. And then there's Beruchnius also. The words that he said, he called it a lie. He denies God's existence. Come on. This is a new question Moshe is asking. He's not only asking Shoirish Hadin, he's asking Shuras Hadin. Shoirish Hadin is he wants to understand why is there a Galus? What's the pretext for it? What's the precedent for it? I looked at Sefer Bereshis, I see sin and punishment, or sin and penalty, or sin and consequence. Sefer Shmois, I see no sin, only exile. That's the whole Galus. Within that itself, I don't understand the whole system. It's the exact opposite of how it's supposed to work. The longer it is, you already finished the process. You're coming close to the process. You already served time. 210 years, there's Exile. Knew at the end it should be easier. No, it becomes much worse. The beginning, it was good, then it gets worse, then it gets even worse, and then it gets even worse. And at the end, as they're already l'chayre leaving, or soon to leave, it's now the worst to the point that the Jews don't give up. They can't listen to him anymore. How many times can you cry wolf? Yeah, that's the krechts. Shekayach rebleib. V'chein gamate bekolus acher and gam ken asay dekach. In this Galus, this last Galus of history, is it B'riyas Olam? In this last Galus, the system is also, the Seder is also this one. Which again is very difficult to understand. It's unfathomable. Because if the whole purpose of Galus is to compensate, to atone for a sin, so the further you are, the more progress you make, the more distant into Galus you go, the easier the burden. What do you see in the last Galus? Opposite. And that's why in Medrash and Svarim, the Galus is considered Luchanim Shalalayla Sarid. That's why it's compared to night, Shabalayla at night, Besoif at the end, who Kardunisa the Tzafra, Toikaf HaChoshech. Kardunisa in Aramaic is darkness, Choshech. The darkness before Tzafra is morning in Aramaic. The darkness right before the morning is considered the thickest darkness, the most intense darkness. Toikaf HaChoshech. That's why Galus is compared to night. It's not like as the night continues, it should get more light. The moment before dawn breaks, and then the light shows up, is called Toikaf HaChoshech. The Kardunis, the darkness, is the most intense. As it's known, the Be'ikvist Meshiche Davke Chutzpe Yazge. The Mishnah says at the end of Masechta Sota, a bunch of signs of Ikvis Meshiche, the end of Galus. Ikvis, the foot, the end of the foot, the sole, right before Mashiach. One of the simonim is Chutzpe Yazge. Chutzpah will increase. And this is the spiritual concept of Melchemes Gog and Magog. The war of Gog and Magog, show inyan tagburis klippus apikursus. It's not just we're talking in Gashmis. Gashmis is one level. The physical suffering of Galus, that doesn't become better with time, on the contrary. But then there's also the spiritual dimension, as discussed earlier in Mitzrayim. Melchemes Gog and Magog, discussed at the end of days, the end of Galus is not just a physical thing. It represents a spiritual war. The intensity of Klippas Apikursus. Val Zeshal is Visvarasai. So Moshe asks, according to his svara, what do you mean? According to his understanding of how Galus works, may us bossi, from when I came, not only did it not get better, it got worse. Okay, now here's quite the parentheses. So
the current Galus is strengthening the question.
Yeah.
We have the same problem.
Same issue, yeah. Same issue. V'chein ato, the same is true now, may us she's chilul daber. Divrei Elikim Chaim is man abal Shem Tov zechern levracha ve'elich nesrabu apikorsum dafka. From when the Baal Shem Tov began teaching Divrei Elikim Chaim, which is the expression of Chassidus, Pnimi Satayra, the words of the living God, nesrabu apikorsum dafka. You see that the opposition, the heresy against all of what Judaism represents became much more intense. This is the concept of Melchemes Gog and Magog spiritually. On this Hashem answers Moshe, Atatira. Like we said before, now you're going to see. Kanal, as we said before, what was the answer? The answer is that what you're seeing now is not a contradiction to Geula. But Atatira, now you'll be able to see the Geula. Why now? Now that the concealment reached the lowest place, the worst concealment, now can be the revelation that is the greatest revelation. You're saying that this is a contradiction to Geula. What you're seeing is not undermining the Geula. On the contrary, this is what's facilitating the Geula. And then he goes on in Parshas Va'era to discuss and answer the first question, which is why there's Galus B'chlal. V'habiyur, the general explanation is Sheklalus inyan hagalus einoi midas hadin sheyipol alav beis hashailas rakum midas harachma. The perception was a different perception. Moshe was coming from a place, there's sin and there's punishment. I didn't see the sins. Why is there punishment? For what? I know Bereshis has Midas Hadin. I'm looking for the same pattern, right? Because this is the paradigm in which I live in. You do bad, there's a consequence. You put your hand in the fire, you get burnt. However you want to explain the consequence, it's a punishment, it's a penalty, it's a cleansing process. But that's what it is. And Bereshis, the whole Sefer works that way. Everything is a consequence of something else. The whole Bereshis works. There's not a story in Bereshis that doesn't lead in. Everything is a domino effect there. From the first story, from eating of the tree all the way down, it goes downhill. Everything. Yaakov takes the brachas from Eisa, there's consequences. He has to run away. Yosef and the brothers have their quarrels, and there's tremendous consequences. Everything works that way. The whole Bereshis is that way. Cain kills his brother, there's consequences. They build a tower, and there's consequences. Light runs to Sdaim. The whole Bereshis works that way. In other words, there is moral justice in the world. So Moshe says, and these are the words of the Medrash, I looked in Shmos, I was expecting the same thing. No, it's not what's happening. Starts off right away, there's a king, and suddenly the Jews are suffering. What, when, where, why, who, when, why? I don't know. So the Rebbeinu Shalom, that's the question number one, Maamar Eisa. Question number two is even worse. Well, together with that, the question becomes even stronger. And if there's a consequence, there has to be a rhythm to it. And that is the longer the punishment, the easier it becomes. Here it's the opposite. So what does Hashem tell him? Opens up Parshas Va'era. After he says, now you will see. You're making a mistake. What you look as the intensity of Galus is really the beginning of Geula. Now they'll be able to be the Geula. Now that Pari went crazy. And now that Pari wants to take away the last privileges, now they'll be the Geula. But then he starts a new Parsha. Vayidaber Elokim el Moshe, Vayomer Elov ani Hashem. So the Maamar explained earlier that Elokim spoke to Moshe, and he almost like reintroduces himself. It's like, Shalom Aleichem, I have a new name. And he says clearly, I didn't reveal myself with this name to the previous generations. But now I'm telling you, Ani Hashem. Elokim speaks to Moshe because Moshe thinks that he is communicating with Elokim, and therefore he has certain expectations and certain questions. Vayomer Elov, and he says, Hashem tells him, you have to get to know me, Ani Hashem. The way the Medrash puts it is that he told Moshe, you think it's Midas Hadin. Less inun ela rachamim. You think you're speaking to Elokim. Elokim speaks to Moshe and says, you don't understand this. Your paradigm, your perception of Galus is erroneous. You're looking at it from a perspective of Midas Hadin, so you have both questions. Why? Give me a good why. Tell me exactly what they did. Were they Zdoim? Were they the generation of the flood? What did they do to deserve this? And number two, why is it getting worse when it's getting better? When it's supposed to get better. It's supposed to end. But the truth is, it's a whole different concept. It's an attribute of compassion. That's why the system follows this pattern. The darkness sometimes gets intensified. And when the darkness reaches a place where one reaches what we call rock bottom, the lowest step, the lowest level, you can't get any lower, then there can be a sudden elevation to a place that is beyond anything. You can't get higher than it. Because when you can appreciate the shift, when you can make that shift from Midas Hadin to Midas Harachimim, and how you see the Galus, so both questions will be answered. The why that you're posing needs to be understood completely in a different way. And the second question of it getting worse before it gets better has to be understood a different way. Because we're not dealing here with a classic case of punishment for sin where the penalty gets easier and easier. It's a completely different situation. And in this situation, in this explanation, you can understand that the darkness gets more intense, and when it reaches a place where you can't get any lower, any worse, at that moment can happen this type of gula, suddenly a iluy, a hisalus, an elevation to a place that you can't get beyond that. Lachein, emer. That's why he says, go tell the Jewish people that I will take them out. And you will know ki ani Hashem, Yud Kei Vav. To understand what does this all mean and how both questions are answered. So we go back now to be able to understand what the Sfarim HaKadoshim, actually Sifri HaKabbalah, what the Sfarim of Kabbalah explain about the system of the Haftarahs. In the opening of the Maamar Eisa B'Psikta, he brought from the Psikta, quoted in Torah Chaim Tov Chav Ches, that there's a system that happens every single year in the Haftarahs which undergo a change. Because till Shavasa Tammuz, till the 3 weeks, the Haftarahs follow the theme of the Parsha. From Shavasa Tammuz till the end of the year and the beginning of the next year, everything changes. For 3 weeks, you have what's called Shlosha de Puranissa, the 3 Haftarahs dealing with destruction. From after Tisha B'Av, Shabbos Nachamu, you have 7 weeks of comfort and consolation, where the Haftarahs change. Then you have the 2 Haftarahs of Tshuva, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, and then you have what happens after that, which is, of course, Sukkot and Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah. Okay. That's what he said in the beginning. Now let's recall what the Kabbalah said about these words in the beginning of the Maamar, and they were very abstract. We learned them in the beginning and they were abstract, and this Maamar is coming to explain this. And that's how it is in Kabbalistic works. Most of it is in code language, and you have to be able to demythologize the abstractions and decode the code language. So the way the Kabbalah describes it is, in the first paragraph of the Maamar that he quoted, in the works of the Arizal and the other Mekabalim, that the Gimel de Puranissa represents the histalkus, the departure of the 3 cognitive faculties, Chachma, Bina, Das, which of course represents a difficult time, a challenging time. Then you have 7 weeks of consolation, and I'm quoting here, we're not trying to understand the meaning, just to understand the structure, even if we don't understand the meaning of it, that the 7th in Nechemta is his Galus moichin da'atike bezayin midas deza. A level of moichin which is very, very deep, called moichin of Atik. Atik is considered the depth of Keser, the core of Keser. The moichin of Atik are revealed in 7 weeks, which represent the 7 midos of Zah. Those are known as the 7 midos of Atzilus, which are, Zah is the 6 midas of Atzilus, Chesed through Yesod. So the moichin of Atik is now revealed in Zah, during those Shiva de Nechemta. Then you have Zoh, which is Chesed through Yesod, and also includes Malchus in this case, because it's 7 weeks. Then you have Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and you have 2 Haftarahs of Tshuva. What is that? Malchus comes up from where? Malchus is the last faculty of Atzilus that goes into Bri Yitzir Asiyah. It comes back up through 2 levels of Tshuva, Tshuva Tata and Tshuva Ilah. A higher level of Tshuva and a lower level of Tshuva. Malchus returns back to its source. Then you have Yom Kippur, which is the second Matan Torah, the Matan Torah of the last tablets. What happens now? The Moichin of Atik, which during Shiva de Nechemte were revealed to the Zoh, are now revealed to the Neshamas of Bri Yitzir Asiyah. Because Malchus came up from Bri Yitzir Asiyah through Tshuvas, and now the Moichin, the highest level of Moichin, are revealed to those Neshamas. And what happens to Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah? Now is the revelation of Simcha and Tainug to those Neshamas of Bri Yitzir Asiyah, which means all of the souls on this world and all of the lower worlds, like we say, V'yismechu b'cha kol Yisrael. We will celebrate with you. We celebrate down here like you celebrate up there. And this happens, this is reenacted every single year in our calendar. So here's a classic example of absolute mystical language. You read it, and like, okay, what am I supposed to do with this? Fine, so you could trust Arizal that he knew what he was talking about, what Tlosa the Puranas says, and what the Halacha does, the Kabbalah also does. They all parallel each other. It's the Nigla and the Pnimius. On one level, it's a change of Haftarah, and it's commemorating Jewish history. The 3 weeks would commemorate the Churban. The 7 weeks of Nechama, we commemorate the Nevuas for the comfort of the Churban and the anticipation for Geula. We come to the era of Tshuva, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and then we come to the time of season of Simchas, Man Simchaseinu, Sukkos, culminated Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah, and then winter comes and life goes back on your heads, as they say. Another year. But there's a rhythm here. The Arizal is not Stam trying to throw madregas on us. There's a rhythm he's trying to explain. There's a tune, a rhythm to the calendar. And what is it? So when he uses all these words of Histalkus Chabad, and Gilui Moichin da Tiket Zoh, and Aliyas HaMalchus, and Gilui Moichin to the Neshamas of Biyah, and the Simcha and Tainug of the Neshamas of Biyah, it's really using cryptic code language that is containing and encapsulating and representing a whole idea. In order to understand this, we had to go into the whole discussion of what happened with Moshe and Hashem. He wasn't asking redundant questions, and Hashem was not just repeating himself a few times. There was a whole system to the conversation, as discussed. Once this is now dealt with, looking at Moshe's questions, we could now come to appreciate all of the metaphoric language, the Kabbalistic language that's used in Samach Kov Sifrei HaKabbalah or Sfarim HaKadoshim. And this language is quoted in many works of Kabbalah and in many works of Chassidus that deal with this season. You will see this language based on the Arizal's language. We can come to understand what this means. First question is, why, when it comes to departure, it's 3? When it comes to consolation, it's 7. Well, why is it not symmetrical? If 3 left, 3 should come back. It's 3 weeks of Avelas, 3 weeks of Histalkus, as we said, but then 7 weeks of Nechemta. 7. And we explain why, because the Histalkus, Arizal says, is of Chachma bin Adas. So it's 3, Chachma bin Adas. The first week is Chachma, the second week is Bina, the third week is the Histalkus, the departure of Das. But then the 7 weeks of comfort, Shiva de Nechemta, are 7 because we spoke about Moichin, the Atik, being revealed in the 7 Midas. The Hinei do what's known, Sha'avelas, so in Histalkus HaMoichin. Avela's grief represents always Histalkus HaMoichin. There's a diminished form of awareness. Generally, it's even on a very practical level. When somebody's in a state of Avelas, their mind is in a blunder. It's a much more diminished way of form of cognition, of awareness, of perception, for good reason. It's a bracha. Va'avelus u'makir hanechama. And yet Avelis is also the source of comfort. Kamashi is buried, as will be explained. And yet, one is 3, one is 7. Why the change? The order generally is this. Soon it will be explained in detail by using a mashal, a metaphor, to explain this whole Seder. But before he gets to the mashal, because from the next paragraph, this Maamar is going to begin a long, long mashal, a very long mashal, a long story, a long parable. But before that, he says, let's outline the structure. Mishleimuson shal moichin hakoidmin nisoyder b'makir moichin chadashim yoser nalam. We said that the 3 moichin chachma bin adas depart. Yeah. From their shleimus, from their perfection of these moichin, in the source there is aroused a higher level of moichin, much higher. V'heiman ikroyim moichin da atika. They're not called Chachma bin Adas Stam. They're called the Moichin the way they are in Atik, which is the Pneumius of Kesser. I know it's strange words, but just bear with it. And because the new higher Moichin are being triggered, the old ones have to depart. So, when the 3 moichin are complete, Chachma bin Adas, in the source, there is now room for a whole new level of moichin. That's called moichin da'atika. And because this new level of moichin is aroused, so the lower level of moichin departs. Va'istalkus u'b'derech klal begibul b'chinas. And the departure happens generally on 3 levels. Be'ilui achar ilui. It happens on 3 levels, one above the other. Keneged gimel moichin chachma bin adas. Va'istalkus b'moichin hakoidmim, whose sibyl is Galus moichin chadashim hayoser nalam. And because the previous moichin depart, this allows for the higher moichin that develop to become revealed.
Means within these 3, 1 allows for 2 and 2 allows for 3. He's not talking about the next 7. He's talking about 1, 2, 3. 3 is being 1 allows for 2.
Yeah. So your goal here now is not to understand what he's saying. Your goal is just to understand the structure of what he's saying, okay? Because then you'll understand what he's saying later. And the structure is that there's something called 3 moichin, chachma bin adas. But there's a much deeper level of moichin. That's moichin in the source of moichin. The source of moichin is called keser, which is the crown above the head, which is also known as atik in Kabbalah, the pneumius of keser. That's the source of everything. So when the moichin are wholesome, are complete, so now we're ready that in the source there should be a whole new level of moichin, what's called moichin of atik. A whole new level of moichin is now getting ripe because of the completion, the perfection of the moichin, the way they came on in Chachma bin Adas. And because the new moichin, a higher level, are becoming ripe and about to be revealed, so the previous moichin, the lower level of moichin, depart. And they depart on 3 levels. Chachma bin Adas, that's represented by the 3 weeks. And that allows for the new higher moichin to be communicated, to be revealed. First, they're only revealed in the 7 midos of the mashpia, of the mentor, of the teacher. So the face of the mashpia becomes lightened, nihiru da'anpin, like we say in Kegavna, right? Right before Baruch Hu, Friday night from the Zoyar. We say Friday night, what happens Friday night? Kol dinim is abrimina. Anpa, nihirim b'nihiru ilah. The face is shining with a higher light. V'chulu misatim in Eshmasan chadatin and kadei cherusah that's loisa levarcha la b'chedva b'nihiru da'anpin, with a luminescent face. So first, the gilui of the new moichin is felt by the mashpia. Nihiru da'ampin, his face lights up, or in the language of Kabbalah, zah, which is the eir ampin, the small face, is illuminated by the moichin of atik, which makes the face lit up in a new way. The makabel, the recipient, is comforted just by the fact that he sees a new face by the teacher. So this gives him hope for a whole new type of revelation. At this point, the new face was by the mashpia, the bright face. But he gets tanchumin, he gets solace from the fact that he sees the new face in the mashpia. Ooh, there's something good happening. Through this, the makabel, the recipient, prepares himself. And he divests himself on two levels. Mafshit literally means like you take off your clothes. We say upashat as b'gadav, right? The kohen took off his clothes. Mafshit means to strip. Like hefshit in a carbon means you flay, you skin it, you remove the skin. So he has to remove himself from two things. He has to divest himself on two levels, remove two layers. Two layers he has to remove. L'kabel gili achadish min hamashpia. To receive the new gili from the mashpia. What's the new gili? The moichin of Atik that came into the mashpia of the 7 weeks. And when the mashpia sees that the recipient removed these layers, he opened himself up. This triggers in the mashpia the ability, empowers him to be able to give him the new moichin, the new awareness, the moichin of Atik. Ki yadua is known shecholol reikon shel hamakabel ma'orir l'tainug ha'poshet shel hamashpia la'ashpia. The hes was tutzach, huh? Shecholol reikon shel hamakabel. The cavity, the empty space that the makabel creates, that is what arouses the deepest pleasure within the mashpia to want to give. That emptiness that the makabel creates. What's the emptiness? It's not filled with anything. Because he divested himself. He removed everything that was filling the empty space. He was mafshit himself on two levels. So what's created now? What's created is a cholol reikon, an empty space. This emptiness is the vacuum that draws forth from the mashpia, the tainug. It's like this, what is it called? The suction effect, right? The vacuum is what brings from the mashpia, it draws, it triggers, it arouses in the mashpia the deepest tainug. Tainug aposhet means his own deepest tainug, which is divested from everything else to be mashpia. And now when the makabel, the student, hears the new moichin from his teacher, now that pleasure that his Rebbe had once, the Nehiru, the Ampin, now he has. But really, by him it's even more. Because for him, it's yet even a greater chiddush and a greater revolution. Zeu klolos haseder megalus Mitzrayim v'galus acha. If you understood this, this is the general outline of the system of Galus Mitzrayim and also of the final Galus. Val derech zeh, or val davar zeh, kavu b'chol shana, min histalkus luchas harishonis ades Galus luchas achronis, which is barlel binyan aftaris. And this is the rhythm that was established every year in the calendar. In Judaism, every year is a microcosm of all of history. The Even Ezra says that Shana, the word Shana, comes from two words. Shana comes from the word Shinui, change, because every year encompasses all of the changes of the seasons and all of the Parshas. You know that every year is really a full life. And Shana from the word Mishnah, which means repeat, like Mishnah Torah, because it's a repeat of the previous year in a different way. But in other words, every year is a container of all of life. Every year is a microcosm of all of life. And the next year is a whole new dimension. But it's a Mishnah, Shana Milashon Mishnah. And it's not only a microcosm of all of life, it's a microcosm of all of history. So the system, the Chazal, were very sensitive to this. And the year therefore follows the rhythm of history. And that rhythm is particularly expressed in the rhythm of Galus to Geula, from the breaking of the first luchas to the celebration with the last luchas, which the breaking of the first luchas happens on Shivasa Tammuz, which is the beginning of the 3 weeks, which represents a breakdown in a relationship, a breakdown in a marriage. Yom Kippur, the last luchas were given and then celebrated on Sukkot and Simchas Torah, so they're fully revealed. That's the rhythm of the Haftarahs that we spoke about in Psikta and Tur and in Sifrei HaKabbalah, but it's the whole rhythm and beat of Galus, the journey from Galus to Gula, beginning with Galus Mitzrayim, and the same is true with this Galus.
The divestiture that you're just referring to that leads to something so great that illumination is also defined as a period where the Muslim Yisrael is reduced. It's a period of particular vulnerability on one.
Yeah.
So that's not a contradiction.
Right. Vulnerability, it's an era of particular vulnerability. That's well said. Well said. So the Arizal always, that's the language of Kabbalah. Moichin, Atik, Zah, Midas, Malchus, Bia, that's the language. But the language has to be decoded. Language has to be explained. So from now, the Maimon takes a shift and goes into the understanding the Chachma Bina Das, an appreciation of what all of this means. So in summation, what do we have? We have a stage number 1, which is a time of vulnerability or a time of istalkus, a time of avelus. And all vulnerability really represents a certain form of istalkus. I'm vulnerable, which means I'm less perceived protection, I guess you could put it that way. Huh? The womb. The wound is open, you say. So there's the time of vulnerability, which Kabbalah describes as Histalkus Gimel Moichin of Chachma Bin Adas, which creates a certain vulnerability, a certain avelus during the 3 weeks. A vacuum, right? A vacuum, yeah. And that's the source of avelus. There is a grief, there is a sadness, there's a melancholy. Maybe not the word melancholy, but there's a sadness, there's a grief there, there's avelus, mourning. And it's expressed in halacha during the 3 weeks. And in mystical language, it's the stalkus of the 3 moichin chachma bin adas. But as he puts it here, it's not just the stalkus of gimel moichin. The stalkus of gimel moichin is happening for a different reason. Because the higher level of moichin and atik has become ripe. How has it become ripe? Because there was the shleimus, the perfection of the 3 moichin of Chachma bin Adas, and because of that perfection, so now we're ready for the next level of moichin, the way moichin are in its source, in their source in Atik. And because the new level of moichin is now triggered and aroused, so the lower moichin have to depart. So what is vulnerable on one level is because on a deeper level, a new level of moichin is being developed. Tweaked, developed, formed.
You've only able to start some up. People deal with grief. People have deal with loss. Grief can be,
But all grief represents something departed, right? There's a yearning. You grieve something that you lost. A person grieves what they lost. Somebody, chas v'shalom, loses a loved one or whatever type of grief it is.
It's a loved one. It's not a start. You're very in touch with that. No?
Presumably it's always the hishtalshalos. Everything we experience, I guess, it's hishtalshalos of some higher experience. What is it going to change this pattern? What is this pattern going to change?
We hope this year. We hope this year it's going to change.
It's not the Hillel to describe the same
So the new moichin are being formed and developed. Yeah. In order for them to be revealed, the old moichin have to depart. When they depart, the new moichin could be revealed. But where are they revealed? First, they're revealed, so to speak, by the mashpia, by the teacher. And those are the 7 weeks of Nechama. And the Makabel's Nechama is only that he sees a new brightness in the face of the teacher. And that itself gives him tremendous comfort because he knows good things are coming. Therefore, he is now triggered to prepare himself for this new revelation by 2 levels of Avshata, by divesting himself on 2 levels, which creates within him a tremendous vacuum. And then when the Mashpia sees this vacuum, this openness, this emptiness, this openness to receive, because without a vacuum, it can't receive. As long as he is stuck in the old pattern, he can't receive the new thing. But when the Mashpia sees that he divested himself from the previous layers, the Mashpia is triggered and aroused and inspired to give him the new Moichen that he experienced during the Shiva de Nechemta, because the tainug of the Mashpia is triggered most by the vessel, the empty vessel that the Makabel creates. So now we just went from Shiva de Nechemta, which is the Gilui of Moichen Atik to the Mashpia, to the 2 weeks of Tshuva, which is the Makabel divesting himself from 2 layers, creating an openness, to Yom Kippur, which, what did he say is Yom Kippur? The Hamshachas Moichen, the Atiket, and the Shamas de Bia, which is the Mashpia giving him the new Moichen. What's now? Sukkot Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah. The Simcha and the Tainug of the student, similar to the Simcha and Tainug of his Rebbe, but even deeper than his Rebbe because it's a greater Chiddush by him. That system of the calendar is a microcosm of the journey of the soul, as we will see, and the journey of history from exile to redemption. You want to know if it's predictable? Why is it new? Yeah.
Same pattern, the same thing. What's so new about it? Because you forgot about it during the Stalkers. Right, get away from you.
The Stalkus HaMoichen is by the Mashpia and certainly by the Makabel. By both.
Start to the Mashpia.
Yeah. Okay.
Why are we being punished?
Who said we're being punished? He said that we're not being punished. Das stuff been biting, you got to change the CD. You're not being punished. We'll see. Okay. Huh?
We're in Tammuz. What's the form?
Bepoil Mamish. Tammuz Bepoil Mamish. Bederech Klal.
You said everything in gracious is
Midas Hadin. Bereshus is Midas Hadin. Right, that's what he asked in the beginning of the Maamar, that Galus Mitzrayim was introduced by Bris Bein Absarim. And Bris Bein Absarim was a moment of tremendous love, and that's when he speaks about Galus, not in terms of a punishment. From here we see that Galus Mitzrayim has a different shirish. God didn't speak about Galus Mitzrayim following a sin. He spoke about Galus Mitzrayim in the middle of the covenant of the greatest connection that he built with Avram Avinu, which was coming from love. Why are you talking about Galus? This means that the Galus has a whole different dimension to it. Not din, but rachamim. Yeah.
When it comes out Mochim, Mochim is from Hashem, right? So when it's on the parts, we're feeling like the pain. We also must question Hashem why we do this. Is that where part of the pain?
Yeah. We'll see. He's going to discuss everything. Bli neder.
This is the lesson of the same lesson that Rabbi uses when Hashem comes down.
Tanya Perik Lamed Vav. Tachten she'ein tachten lamata himenu.
That's an expression of absolute bottom.
The lowest, yeah. I guess it's connected, yeah.
That's also the beginning of a new.
Yeah. That's from the Tachten, you can go to the greatest Elyon, yeah. Right.
Asach, all this was not muchen sich as ich will. As ich will ja. Welche Tat macht das nicht zum muchen sich?
The frag's good. The frag's good. I hear you. Yeah. Asach hatzlacha.
I hope you didn't mind to us.
Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. It's fine. All questions are welcome, always.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.